everyone. My name is Judy Rocher, and I'm a fully qualified nutritional therapist and naturopath. I qualified many years ago, and I have also completed training in the chrysalis effect, which is specifically for ME and chronic fatigue. I worked for a supplement company for 3.5 years, where I was responsible for training practitioners in natural therapies for Lyme disease and other chronic illnesses. So this has become a bit of my speciality. I was the director of studies at the College of Naturopathic Medicine for a year. I still lecture for the College of Naturopathic Medicine, and they're one of the leading naturopathic and nutrition colleges in the country, and they have global offices around the world as well. I worked for the London Clinic of Nutrition for 2.5 years, where I was their Lyme specialist. And then I trained in Dr. Dietrick Klinghardt's autonomic response testing, which is a brilliant way of determining issues in the human body. And I have passed their accreditation exam, so I'm fully accredited. I also run my own clinic, and I have clinics in Brighton and also in London in Harley Street. So I've been doing this for a while. So I'm really excited today to bring you up to date with some information on natural ways to support the immune system. This is so important in these times. So my presentations have been split into 2 parts. The first part is basically going to run through various areas that compromise our immune system. And then the second part will give you all the solutions. So don't get too disheartened on the first part, because solutions are on the way in the second half. And I hope you get to watch both parts. Okay, so we'll just move on. So part 1, this one is going to cover things such as the effects of stress on the immune system and how that can compromise our immune systems. We're going to look a bit into the exposure to electromagnetic radiation and how this is causing problems with our frequency, and the need for detoxification. We're going to cover generally a number of the toxins, but more specifically some of the main culprits. We'll look at dental issues and how these can really cause problems with immune function. And of course, diets, people's diet and what they eat is crucial, and the encompassing nutritional deficiencies which can result from poor diets. Gut issues are extremely important, and most of you will be aware of this, and we'll look into that later on in the program. And then we'll look at things like adverse childhood events, traumas, emotional issues, really important in keeping a strong immune system. And finally, the problems that are ensuing with the decline in exposure to natural light. Part 2, as I said, we're going to cover all the solutions. So that will be the second webinar in this series. So immunity, I'm not going to go too in depth into all the intricacies of the immune system. It's an extremely complex and rapidly developing field. It's major importance to our overall health, and we know the older we get, our immune system can actually decline. And so it's really important to work all the time on keeping our immune system strong. It's truly holistic, so we have to look at things like the environment, all of our psychological problems, hormonal, nutritional, neurological factors. All of these have a massive influence on the immune system, and it's never just one area. It's a synergy between all of those factors. So we know the best approach is to look at the lifestyle and all of the stress reduction, exercise, as well as diet, plant-based medicine and supplementation. The first thing we're going to look at is the effects of stress. Now, this is not just psychological stress. And we know with our busy lives, the psychological stress can be a major issue. But the problem comes in is where we have this chronic long-term stress. So the short-term stress is absolutely fine. It can be very motivational, get us up in the morning, get us working for the day. But it's where the stress becomes long-term and chronic that it really starts to affect our health. You know, with the technology now, we don't get any rest. We're constantly bombarded by texts and emails, and we feel that we have to respond constantly throughout the day. And we're just not getting those times of quiet, peaceful reflection that we used to in days gone by. We're also getting exposed to numerous toxins, which are massive stressor to our body. And our diets are just not supporting our liver detoxification pathways, which need multiple nutrients in order to function optimally. The lack of sleep is massive, and virtually all my clients I see have got issues with sleep. And we'll go in more deeply during the program to show what an issue this is and what we can actually do to try and help people to improve on their sleep. It's true that 75 to 90% of doctors' visits are all related to conditions which are caused by stress. So massively important. And obviously exercise is one of the best ways to alleviate stress, lower cholesterol, and really help us to relax. So we know that chronic stress can lead to many diseases, things like diabetes, heart disease, digestive disorders, all the IBS, and all of these disorders are often related to stress. And, you know, many of us are living with pain, we're living with worry, sadness, anger, all of these negative negative emotions can really affect us physically as well. We release far more stress hormones, the adrenaline and the cortisol, and these we release, especially when we're under chronic stress, to the detriment of the other hormones. So our bodies are not interested in building more sex hormones or more thyroid hormones. They just want to keep us running away from the saber-toothed tiger or whatever the body perceives to be the stress. And it might just be sitting in front of a computer with some deadline coming up, but you're still producing that same cortisol that you would if you were being chased by a predator. And unfortunately, the high levels of stress not only affect sleep, but they affect our food choices. We tend to want to eat the sugar, and we go for the stimulants like the caffeine, and then we want the alcohol in the evening to wind down. So it almost drives our choices to be detrimental to our health. So it has that impact as well. This research paper by Dr. Esther Sternberg, she actually showed that when white blood cells were bathed in cortisol, it basically tells those white blood cells to stop fighting. So you can see how that chronic stress will depress our immune system when it even stops our white blood cells from fighting invaders. Here's another research paper which shows that the stress hormones inhibit the function of many of our very, very important arsenal of immune cells to fight off invaders, infections, toxins, all the rest of it that we are faced with. And this one showed that by the high levels of cortisol inhibited natural killer cell activity. And we'll get into a bit later remedies of how to improve our natural killer cell activity. So important to stop infections, bacterial infections, Lyme disease, whatever, and also cancers. We know the natural killer cells play a very important role to prevent that as well. So the next thing we're going to move on to is electromagnetic radiation. And although we can't physically see this and it's not a tangible thing, we are bombarded by it. It's all around us. Most of us have Wi-Fi routers in our homes. We know now that the Earth is being bathed with these satellites around the Earth, and they are beaming these electromagnetic radiation down onto us, and it's a massive stressor on our body. Our bodies resonate at a particular frequency, And they found that a frequency of 528 hertz is very, very healing for both our emotional and physical well-being. So this is a wonderful healing frequency. But we know that a lot of the frequencies, it's 2.5 gigahertz is what we have at the moment with the 3G and the 4G. And when the 5G comes in, it'll be as high as 5 to 300 gigahertz, which are going to be affecting our bodies. And this is a massive, massive stressor. We know in the last few years there's been an 80% of reduction in the insect population and 75% reduction of songbirds where they've just vanished. And these are really in areas where there's good cell phone coverage. And we know with the new way the world is going, that the entire world is going to have brilliant cell phone coverage. So we know that's going to have a massive impact on not just ourselves, but the insects, the bees, the animals, the plants, everything that we coexist with. So where do we get all this electromagnetic radiation from? Well, I've already mentioned the Wi-Fi cell phone boxes that we all have in our houses, but obviously using your cell phone, the cordless phones, the baby monitors, smart meters, living in proximity to cell phone towers. There's been a lot of research showing how these can cause higher incidences of chronic fatigue, cancers, various illnesses, and also these Bluetooth earphones that are so popular these days, and not just the earphones, but anything Bluetooth. This is a slide which shows, and it only goes up to 2012, but basically it's showing the increase in radiation, microwave radiation that we're being exposed to. And the green line that you can see towards the bottom of the slide is the level that was safe for human beings. And already in 2012, it's massively above the limit that is deemed to be safe for human existence. And this slide shows, I think it was a study done in France, in a school classroom in France, where they took 2 little tubs of watercress and they put them in identical conditions, had the same amount of sunlight, the same amount of water, in exactly the same conditions. But they put one of the tubs of watercress right next to the Wi-Fi router, and no guesses for seeing which one that was. It's the one on the right. And we sort of say, well, what do you want your child's brain to look like? The one on the left or the one on the right? Which one of these things has led to France actually banning Wi-Fi in the classroom. So electromagnetic radiation, I won't go through, it's a massive, massive subject, but some of the main problems with it is that it interferes with our heavy metal detoxification. And we'll see later on as we go through the slides why this is becoming such an issue for us. Prolonged exposure to electromagnetic radiation impacts the immune system negatively. And I've put a couple of research papers up here which show just that. One of them is from 1992, but there's a more recent one from 2017, which basically recorded the impact of Wi-Fi radiation on DNA damage and antioxidants in peripheral blood lymphocytes. These are our white blood cells that fight infection. And these were tested in people that were lived within 80 meters of mobile phone base stations. And they found that the rising radio frequency power density and this really caused lipid degradation, which means it caused a lot of oxidation within the cells. And the concentration of one of our major antioxidants, glutathione, was greatly reduced. And we need the glutathione to help us detoxify. And there was also a reduction in enzyme activity. And again, these enzymes are crucial for us. Okay, so here I won't go through all 23 studies, but there were up to 23 studies which showed how the electromagnetic radiation affects our voltage-gated calcium channels and causes this massive release of peroxynitrite. What is peroxynitrite? It's a powerful oxidant that's a mediator of protein and lipid oxidation, and it can lead to cell death and mitochondrial dysfunction. So what does that mean? Basically, it means that this is one of the main causes of chronic fatigue and ME that we're seeing in so many people. All my clients have got fatigue as one of their main symptoms. And I won't go through all of these different research papers. If you have time, you can look them up for yourself. But basically, an excellent one was by Professor Martin Paul, and he showed that the high levels of peroxynitrite was definitely a cause of chronic fatigue syndrome. And also, they're leading to other diseases like Alzheimer's disease. We can see the massive increase in dementia and Alzheimer's disease in our aging population, and also these other diseases like multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's disease. So absolutely important to protect ourselves from the electromagnetic radiation. Okay, so getting on to cordless phones. People think all their little cordless phones sitting in the corner of the room is absolutely fine. No, they're not. There's published research which shows that the cordless phones are 3 times more dangerous than cell phones. People don't seem to realize that the cordless base station constantly emits a pulsing microwave at full power as long as it's plugged in, whether the phone's in use or not. And the German Federal Radiation Protection Agency stated that a cordless phone is often the strongest source of radiation in a private home. So you've got your Wi-Fi router at one end of the house, your cordless phone base station at the other side of the house, and then your smart meter outside your house is just beaming that radiation into you, and it really, really is affecting immunity and good health. Right, so I think that was enough on the electromagnetic radiation. I think you get the picture there. I don't want to scare you, and just remember we do give you solutions in my next program. Right, so we're now going to move on to the toxic load. And this is a very, very key and important factor in keeping our immune system strong, because about 60 years ago, man-made chemicals started to enter our world, and they can damage every aspect of our physiological functions, and they play a role in virtually every disease. There's about 23,000 toxic chemicals in our bodies, and they are just pervasive. They are everywhere, and they stockpile in the system. The body quite often doesn't have a mechanism to remove these safely from our system, so they pile up. And when these chemicals are brought into our environment, they are tested individually for their safety and in small, low quantities. It's never taken into account what might happen as the amount of these toxins build up in our bodies. And basically, they never test one toxin together with another. So they're largely untested. The Environmental Protection Agency studies showed that 100% of people had dioxins, PCBs, dichlorobenzene, and xylene in their fat cells. When we ingest toxins or inhale toxins or get them in through our skin, they are so toxic that our body doesn't want them circulating around in our bloodstream. And so what they do is they store the toxins in the fat cells. And this is one of the reasons why it's so difficult for some people to lose weight. The body doesn't want to flood the system with a lot of toxins as the fat cells are released. Phthalates, we know that the BPA, bisphenol A, they were all used as hormone replacement therapy, and they have a massive endocrine disrupting function. So they mess with our hormones, and most of them are carcinogenic as well. The Inuit mothers in the Arctic have some of the highest levels of modern chemical poisons in their breast milk. So the extent of this toxic load has spread throughout the world, and there's virtually none of us are free of it. We know bisphenol A is in the lining of canned foods and in the lining of drinks. So you buy a carton of oat milk or whatever, thinking you're doing something good for yourself, but it can be lined with a plastic containing BPA. We know rice is very high in arsenic, especially if the water's been contaminated with arsenic and highly polluted, as well as chicken. Non-organic chicken is high in arsenic due to the feed that they give them. Soy grown in high phosphate fertilizers is very high in cadmium. And plants that grow in minerals that are depleted, where the soils are depleted, they've shown that, for example, if the soil is lacking in zinc, the plant will take up cadmium instead. It'll take up a toxic metal where needed, where it would have normally had zinc. So we're also getting these problems from our foods that are grown in, poor soils. We know that antibiotics and hormones are in the animal products, and that these toxins are in our bodies like ticking time bombs. So what I'm going to do is just cover some of the three of the main toxins that cause us a lot of problems. And the first one that I'm going to look at is glyphosate. Now, glyphosate was first introduced in 1974. It's a herbicide, and it's the main ingredient in the herbicide called Roundup, and it's sprayed on conventionally grown crops. Stephanie Seneff is an expert on this and has done loads of brilliant research on it, and I really urge you to look at some of her research. But some of the stuff that she's found is that it inhibits the cytokine P450 enzymes. These are enzymes which are really important to help our bodies detoxify. So what this means is that the glyphosate not only poisons us, but it stops us from getting rid of other toxins. So it actually enhances the damaging effect from other toxins. The other thing is, when glyphosate was licensed, it was licensed as a chelator. So it chelates good minerals from our bodies. And one example of this is the depletion of manganese in plants. There's a very good research paper on this which shows that the plants are getting very depleted in manganese and other minerals, and this is implicated in Alzheimer's disease, autism, depression, and also Parkinson's disease. Glyphosate also has the ability to selectively destroy our healthy microbiome, and it encourages the growth of pathogens in the gut. Now, we know that many people have got a gluten intolerance. Currently it seems to be rising at a rapid speed, and one of the reasons for that is the glyphosate in the food supply. It also targets the pineal gland, and we'll come into that a little bit later. Pineal gland is crucial for sleep, as well as many other of our autonomic responses in our body. Glyphosate was also it's a glycine analog, and glycine is a very important amino acid, which and it's also a neurotransmitter, and it's really important for our mental health. And what the glyphosate does is it tricks the body. It mimics glycine, so it tricks the immune system into allowing glyphosate into the body, and also through the blood-brain barrier into the brain. So the glyphosate gets into the pineal gland and can affect sleep and has a really deleterious effect on the body. And this is a research paper from the International Agency for the Research on Cancer, and it shows that in 2015, the IARC determined that glyphosate is a probable carcinogen to humans and was given the classification of 2A. So it is a cancer-causing agent as well. So highly, highly toxic substance. We're going to move on to aluminium, and aluminium is not that toxic if it's absorbed, if it's taken in orally on its own, but it has a devastating synergistic effect if there's mercury in the system. And we know there's not a single person on the planet that does not have mercury in their body. And no river body of water, it's in the air, it's in the food, and it's often in people's teeth in the form of amalgam fillings. We have no biological barrier to inhaled aluminium, and we find that what's happening is the aluminium is being sprayed into the atmosphere in this geoengineering as a form of cooling down the planet, and in the hope it'll reflect the heat away from the planet. And this is being inhaled, and it's causing a lot of problems. We're also finding many of the vaccinations have aluminium as an adjuvant to stimulate the immune system so that the virus or whatever the vaccine is trying to prevent becomes more active. And we're finding the aluminium is causing problems in the human body. But specifically, it's the nanotechnology that is a cause for concern, because it's these ultrafine particles that are being released into the atmosphere that are causing such a lot of problem. They're finding that they're causing massive inflammation in the vascular system and endothelial dysfunction, which can lead to problems like atherosclerosis and really cause a lot of inflammation and contribute to heart disease. And there was a good research paper which showed just this. Then we go on to mercury. Mercury is a well-established neurotoxin, and when it's present in the body, it poisons the nervous system. Our silver fillings or amalgam fillings, they are typically 55% mercury. Each filling releases about 1 microgram of mercury every day, and the half-life for mercury is 2 months. So what the half-life measures is how long it takes for 50% of the substance to be cleared from the body, and that takes 2 months. And when we're getting more and more each day, especially if you've got a mouthful of fillings, this can build up in the system and cause a lot of problems. It also can inhibit the binding of hormones like serotonin. We know serotonin is our happy hormone, and this can be one of the reasons why there's such a lot of anxiety and depression. The mercury toxicity can get into the mitochondria, cause chronic fatigue, and also fibromyalgia. And we get mercury not only from the atmosphere, from our fillings. We know people are cremated with a mouthful of fillings, and obviously the cremation smoke goes into the atmosphere, which could possibly be inhaled. And also we get it from fish. So things like canned tuna and swordfish have got high levels of mercury, and this contributes to the load. Stortbecker, he put out this research in 1985, which showed that mercury poisoning from dental amalgam was a massive hazard to the human brain. Why are we still doing it today? I have no idea. And then there was a research done by Hahn in 1990, and this looked at monkeys, where they took some monkeys who had the same dentition, the same diet, the same feeding regimen, and the same chewing pattern as humans. And they put mercury fillings into their mouths, and then they were able to, using radioactive isotopes, were able to tell where the mercury had gone in the monkeys' bodies. And they found there was a massive increase in the kidney, the gastrointestinal tract, and in the jaw, all around where the mercury fillings had been placed. And then another research paper was done which showed how the mercury can really reduce phagocytic activity. So this is another form of our white blood cells which fight infections. So they are being affected by the mercury, and it caused marked increase in cell death. So, and it didn't matter what type of mercury, whether it was fish or whether it was from amalgams or where it was from, but it definitely affects the immune system in a negative way. The metals, they bind to sulfhydryl groups on the cells, which means that that these the cell membranes attract heavy metals. So what that means is that when the cells have been attracted many of these heavy metals, the body assumes that it's a foreign cell because it doesn't recognize it. And then it starts attacking the cell. And this is the basis of autoimmune conditions. And we're seeing a massive rise in autoimmunity as well. Okay, so we're going to look into a bit more detail on the dental issues. We've covered more or less the amalgam, the dangers of having amalgam fillings in the mouth. We're now going to look at things like cavitations in the jaw. And this can happen where you've had, for example, wisdom teeth removed, and the wisdom teeth are just taken out and the pockets are left, the open pockets are left in the back of the jaw, and they collect loads of bacteria. We know how many different bacteria are in the mouth, and these get into these pockets. The gum then heals over the top of the pockets and can cause a festering amount of infection in the jaw. And you may not feel this, you may not have a problem. Some people will get abscesses. Some people don't ever know that they have an issue there, but it can be silently poisoning the body. And there's been good research papers linking cavitations in the jaw with heart disease. So it's really important. There are good biological dentists that can scan the jaw to see if there's cavitations, to see if these need to be rectified. And we'll cover that in more detail in the part 2. Root canals can have the same problem. You can get infection at the base of the root canal. It's basically a dead tooth that's just sitting in the mouth. And all the tiny little tubules within that tooth collect millions and millions of bacteria, can slowly poison the body and cause a lot of problems, can cause a lot of bone wastage around the base of the tooth, and can be a real cause of problems for the immune function. Having gold crowns and other metals in the mouth, gold together with mercury can cause a battery effect in the mouth, and this is also needs to be rectified only by a biological dentist. So very important for that. Okay, so we're going to move a bit onto the gut and the importance of a healthy microbiome. We know our microbiome are some of the best chelators of these heavy metals and toxins, and to have a wonderfully diverse microbiome is so crucial for our well-being. We should have about 2,000 different probiotics in our gut, but we know now that our diversity has decreased and decreased and decreased over the years as each mother has got less, and then she passes less on to the next baby, and the diversity and the number of their microbiome is decreasing. So this is partly due to excessive use of antibiotics. I know it's been reduced in recent years, but in a few years ago, if you got a cold, you'd go to the doctor and get antibiotics, and this was always supposedly to prevent a secondary bacterial infection from you having the cold. And so antibiotics could be given many times in a year. Obviously, long-term chronic stress can affect the microbiome, not least by decreasing the stomach acid in the actual stomach. So that's our first line of defense against ingested pathogens that might come in our food and in our water. So if the stomach acid is low, these infections can set up shop, and then also can compete in the gut, so lower the microbiome by taking over areas of the gut. Electromagnetic radiation, we always told never to text or hold anything close to our stomach because it can really affect the microbiome in our gut. Obviously, the toxins, the glyphosate is a massive. We spoke earlier about how the fact that the glyphosate encourages the growth of pathogens in the gut while decreasing the microbiome. So there's more than 800 studies which show that the intake of soil-based organisms is really, really important for reducing many, many health conditions. I don't know if any of you have watched any of the lovely YouTubes by the Dr. Zach Bush, who is absolutely brilliant about just really replenishing the soil, getting the life, getting it living soil with all the microbiome back. And if we grew our plants in that beautiful living soil, we would get the health benefits from that. Because this massive rise of allergies and asthma, IBS, ulcerative colitis, indigestion, malabsorption, all of this is coming from, our diets, our depleted microbiome. It has a massive, massive effect on immunity and our ability to resist disease. We know our microbiome actually create many of our vitamins. It even makes vitamin C. We always thought that we had to eat vitamin C to get it, but now know they're finding that our bodies can actually make vitamin C, and this massive amount of the microbiome can help create vitamins of whatever we need. And as I said, they're the best chelator of those hideous toxins that we're ingesting all the time. So this is a hideous diet, which hopefully none of you are eating, but this is a massive, massive effect on the immune system. You're getting all the acrylamides from the deep fried chips in the trans fats and the awful oils and all the sugars and the E numbers in all of those hideous foods, and just completely depleting our immune systems. And you can do it for a while you're young. You might get away with having a terrible diet, but over time it will catch up on you as your detox pathways start to diminish and your immune system gets lowered more and more. Even if we try and eat, this is a lovely, from the Alliance for Natural Health, a lovely way of eating to improve our immunity. But even so, we know that our soils are so depleted now and just don't have all the lovely nutrients that they should have. It's a terrible lack of minerals in our diet, which is leading to an increase in disease and serious increase in immune problems. We all know about lack of zinc being so important for good health, but there are loads of minerals and micro minerals that are really, really needed as well. Crops fertilized with nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. That's what they tend to use, the same soil over and over again, and just replenish those three things without replenishing all of those lovely trace minerals. Fulvic and humic acid is absolutely brilliant for increasing absorption and delivery of nutrients to the cells. And it also provides electrons or a charge to the cell membranes to actually restore the cellular energetics. The humic acid, we know, supports a healthy immune system and restores electrolyte balance. And we know the fulvic acid is where all the leaves would fall and build up over the centuries, this really thick, dark, black-looking soil, sort of like a peat, where the plants would be grown in that and be really, really healthy plants. So the addition of these lovely fulvic and humic minerals into the diet can convert fragments of free radicals in the cells back into nutrition. So it has this massive antioxidant effect, anti-aging effect on the cells. Okay, so we're now going to cover lack of sleep. And I think if any of you know, if you've had a few heavy nights, within a couple of days you'll get a cold or something, you really know that real lack of sleep can have a major issue on the immune system and our ability to fight off pathogens. So what's causing the lack of sleep? Well, we know the electromagnetic radiation is having a massive effect on the pineal gland. And our pineal gland is just so, so important to produce, because not only does it produce melatonin, but it also controls a lot of the other functions of our bodies. So basically, we have this lovely circadian rhythm where we would go to sleep at night, where as it gets dark, and then get into a lovely deep sleep, and this amazing lymphatic system in our brains, caused by the rise in melatonin, flushes the toxins from our brain, enables us to do this wonderful housekeeping overnight. And in the morning, when the natural light hits our eyes, we would be full of the joys of spring and, really have all our energy and ready to face the day as our cortisol rises to give us the motivation and feel great for the day. But this is not happening in a lot of people, because what they're doing is they're watching TV and blue screens and iPads and iPhones late into the night, causing this false blue light going into the eyes and stimulating the optic nerve, so the body thinks, oh, it's still daylight, it's still middle of the day. Then you try and go to sleep and wonder why you're battling with sleep. It's not only the electromagnetic radiation that affects the pineal, because the glyphosate, the aluminium and fluoride are causing a massive calcification of the pineal gland, which is causing major problems, and not only for connection to our higher consciousness and to our spirituality, but also causing this major effect on melatonin production. Melatonin is also, we know, is very, very important to help us to resist infections, and so it has a wonderful antioxidant and ability to help us resist infections. So it causes this massive dysfunction in the pineal gland, and this is really one of the major things we should be paying attention to in this day and age. We used to, before we went to bed, we'd have a few hours where we read a book, or we went for a walk, or we had a lovely relaxing bath, or did some meditation, but that just doesn't happen anymore. Half the time we're just worrying about what's coming the next day. We can't stay present. We're not in the present. We're either worrying about what this one said in the past, or what we did in the past, or else we're worrying about things that may happen in the future. And this is causing this constant sort of state of stress in our bodies, which is seriously affecting our ability to have that really lovely night's sleep. So our rooms have to be totally dark. The melatonin is only triggered in the dark. So if you've got pale curtains with a big street light, LED light outside your room, and you're lying there expecting to sleep, it probably won't happen. Or if it does, you're not getting into that really deep, lovely, restful sleep. So really important to pay as much attention as you can to getting a good night's sleep, because the world is a better place after you've had a really good night's sleep. So I've talked a bit about the melatonin. It's a really, really effective, potent neuroprotective chemical in the central nervous system. Protects us from the damage to the heavy metals, protects us from the toxins, infections, but it also helps to protect us from the negative effects of the electromagnetic radiation. We only heal and detoxify when we're in that deep sleep. And this is one of the ways that we just don't detoxify as well as we should, because we're just not getting that good sleep. Really, really important to help us to fight infections, as I said. Okay, the psychological component is, again, another crucial thing that just really, really affects our immune health. Dr. Klinghardt goes very, very deeply into these philosophies, and it's really important to pay attention to past traumas, any adverse childhood events that might have happened, anything that might just be triggering some sort of emotional or negative pattern of thinking, because we know that negative thoughts actually build enzymes and can actually really seriously affect our immune system. Dr. David Servan-Schreiber, he was a doctor who helped to recover from brain cancer, and he did a lot of research into this area and found that every cancer could be traced back to a time when the person was feeling completely hopeless and felt like there was nothing that they could do. And it's been proved that these negative thoughts, depression, really feeling really hopeless, can actually lower natural killer cells and can affect our immunity in a very negative way. Fear is massively important, massively affect the immune system. It turns on our lizard brain, the amygdala part of the brain, where our logical brains no longer work so well, and we just sort of want somebody to save us. We just want to, we go into this terrible fear response, and we don't think logically. And also isolation massively lowers the immune system and massively makes us more susceptible to any infections or illnesses that might be around us. So important factors to remember. Okay, so the last part is the effects of light. And as being an ART practitioner, we test the autonomic response system, and it's all to do with light emissions, biophoton emissions. And we know that every cell in our body emits light. And this light is highly, highly structured and coherent in these beautiful straight planes. And it allows the communication of neighboring cells inside the body and organisms and life outside the body as well. Isn't that incredible? How we can communicate with trees and with things outside of our body as well. And we all do this by the transmission of light. And the light carries unlimited amounts of information biodirectionally. So it's sending information out and it's gathering information back in and carrying it back to the origin in the DNA. And healthy cells emit this beautiful, coherent light. And it's one of the ways we're using our autonomic response testing that we can see where an organ is becoming dysfunctional, is to tell where the light starts to come out in an incoherent fashion from a particular area or organ. So what can be causing all of this lack of light emissions coming from our bodies? Well, we know it's lack of natural sunlight. So much of us are sitting in artificial light day in, day out. And, we on our computers, we're living indoors. We've made our homes so comfortable that it's no longer needed for us to actually go outside. And the natural light, there's just no replacement for natural light. Where we're getting all the full spectrum of the sun, for the sunlight that gets absorbed into our bodies and all those amazing colors. We know we have these auras all around our bodies, which are in these incredible different colors of the rainbow. And these are very, very important to health. And really, really important to helping with our immune system as well. So light stimulation actually stimulates the optic nerves and sends photocurrents to the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus governs our autonomic response system. So if we haven't got enough of this beautiful light coming into our eyes, then it really negatively affects our autonomic response system, which can in turn affect our immune system extremely negatively. We know that lack of sunlight causes depression, not least of which because the sunlight on the skin can cause production or increase production of the very, very valuable vitamin D, which we'll cover more in part 2. But it's such an important part for the healthy functioning of the autonomic responses, the autonomic nervous system. And as I said, it really helps the hypothalamus to keep the immune system as healthy as it possibly can. Okay, so I hope you've really enjoyed listening to part 1, and I hope you didn't get too despondent, because the wonderful solutions are all going to come in part 2 of the presentation, and we'll try and guide you through really practical, brilliant ways that you can help to protect your immune system and really keep yourself strong over the coming months, years, and for the rest of your life, and prevent the start or the onset of any of these awful degenerative diseases which are affecting a lot of our population in the current climate that we live in. So it's been wonderful to have shared this time with you, and I look forward to seeing you soon.